Hi guys, what's up? For my Sailor Jupiter cake, I am starting with a raspberry rose mousse, which starts with blooming some gelatin in some water in a bowl. For the mousse, not for the mousse. Actually, yes, for the mousse. I'm so eloquent. I'm first making a curd, and this starts with egg yolks, which I whisk with a little cornstarch. This ensures that the curd will thicken and have a nice glossy texture. So you whisk that at lightning speed, and then on the stovetop, I am combining some frozen raspberries, sugar, and butter, and I'm just cooking that on medium heat until it breaks down and becomes a nice thick syrupy raspberry thing. And then at this point I introduce it gently to the egg yolks, just a little bit of it to temper the egg yolks. You don't want to make scrambled eggs. And then whisking furiously, I stir that on top of the stove, and you want to do this for a couple minutes on medium heat, whisking constantly until it thickens a little bit. And then you want to sieve it into the gelatin mixture from before. This process of removing the seeds is a little bit tedious, but it's definitely worth it. You want a nice smooth mousse. So scrape it off of the foot of your strainer, which you shouldn't have. You should use a different strainer than I used. Anyway, whisk gently to combine with the gelatin, and do not refrigerate because it will harden up and become jello if you do that. So just leave it at room temperature. And now I'm making the cake. I'm doing a sponge cake from a Tres Leches cake. This information will become relevant in a future cake video. But it's a sponge cake. I mean, there's so many different kinds of sponge cakes. This one is both egg white and yolks. I'm starting with whites with some cream of tartar, whipping it to soft peaks, not stiff peaks. So you'll see I demonstrate soft peaks is when it is, well, soft. It kind of flops over. It doesn't stiffen up. And when it gets to that stage, you start adding the sugar. If you add the sugar at the beginning, it does not really whip up all the way. And then at this point you introduce the egg yolks, which is kind of a strange technique. I don't see that in many other cakes, like where you painstakingly whip the whites separately only to add the yolks in later, but it works mysteriously. And after that you sift in those dry ingredients, which is mostly just cake flour, and I think there's also some baking powder in there. At this point, if you are doing a tres leches sponge cake, you just add plain milk to your mixture, but I'm adding milk infused with a little vanilla extract. There, you see it? That's why it's kind of brown, right? It's not gross milk, it's milk with vanilla. I do this because I wanted the cake itself to also have some flavor. And I have a springform pan lined with parchment. It's really important for this particular cake that it be made in a springform pan, and you'll see why later. Get it as smooth as possible, and then you just want to bake that off in the oven until it is done, however long the recipe says to bake it, basically. And then what I need to do is make chocolate leaves. This is my first time ever actually making chocolate leaves. Like what you're watching right now, that is the very first chocolate leaf I have ever made. I researched which leaves are toxic and which aren't, and that's a gardenia leaf. It's a really good size, a nice shape, and it's pretty, and they're at my apartment complex, so I use that. You paint it on the back side of the leaf, not the front glossy side. That way you will get more line definition in your leaves. And I found out after doing a few of these that you want to coat it on pretty thick, like thicker than you think you want to, and especially make sure that the center seam of the leaf is coated really thick, because a lot of my leaves wound up breaking in half there because it's really easy for the chocolate to kind of fall off of the center of the leaf. So you cover parchment paper full of those and put them in the fridge for, I did a half hour just to be safe, and then you very gently peel the leaf back, and like magic, you have a chocolate leaf. These are super fun to make, and I'm definitely going to be making more of these in the future. Be careful because the, not the moisture, I almost said moisture, the heat from your hands will melt the chocolate like pretty quickly. So you have to do this pretty quickly, and I'd say after every 3 or 4 leaves, put them back in the fridge for a minute or two just to firm up. See the melted chocolate that has already gathered on my hand, but pretty chocolate leaf. Now I am making the matcha buttercream. I chose matcha for the frosting because it's green, and Sailor Jupiter's green, and green nature and all that, but it also goes really well with raspberries and with rose. And I chose the raspberries for the flavor and for the color, and the rose, of course, because of her iconic rose earrings. And I am beating that really fast, faster than humanly possible. It's just a basic buttercream with powdered sugar, butter, and cream. And then instead of adding vanilla extract or some other flavoring, I just add powdered green tea. So it works really nicely, makes a really nice green tea frosting. I think I wound up putting like a whole tablespoon of matcha powder in there. Now in a separate bowl, I'm making rose buttercream. I was going to use cream infused with dried rose petals. That's often how I make, well, that's always how I make rose-infused whipped cream. See the dried rose petals in that cream? It makes a really nice rose-infused whipped cream and rose-infused ice cream, but I found that it didn't add any flavor to this buttercream, so I wound up adding rose extract. And the flavor of this is fine, actually. It tastes slightly artificial, but look at that hideous color. That's like, why? Why would anyone voluntarily be like, ooh, I know what color to make this rose extract. Hideous hot pink. That will be appetizing. So I'm adding blue food coloring to it just to make it less hideous. And it's hard to see the color in this video and against that orange bowl, but believe me, that looked like a better pink. All right, so I didn't get this on camera, but I added a couple splashes of rose water to my raspberry curd, and now I'm mixing it very gently, folding it in with some just plain whipped cream. And this first bit that I'm mixing in is, you know, kind of sloppy, but after that you want to very gently fold in, introduce the raspberry rose curd to the whipped cream. And I just gotta say, this is delicious. Just this component of the cake alone, I would definitely make just this mousse again and chill it in individual bowls, but I'm not. I'm putting it in a cake. So this is the sponge cake we made earlier. I'm cutting it into half, and I'm gonna flip this half over just because I don't want to risk the mousse seeping into the cake. I want a nice, like, hard, smooth surface for it to spread on, so it'll have a nicer presentation when it's unmolded later. And this is why it was really important that we had a springform pan, because this way the mousse, we can spread it all the way out to the edges of the pan, and it won't, you know, slide out and look sloppy. It'll have a nice clean finish when we take it out of the pan. So you want to get this as smooth and as even as you can, this raspberry rose mousse. And a lovely pink color. See, that's a good pink. It's like unlike that weird hot pink from earlier. And then I put the matcha frosting on top of that. This is unusual, like usually I wait until the very end, and then I pipe the little rose buttercream, and then I add fresh raspberries, and it looks beautiful, right? And then I thought 4 chocolate leaves, but then I thought that looks lonely, let's put on 4 more chocolate leaves, and finish it off with a little dollop of rose in the center and a raspberry, and wait a minute, that looks pretty much exactly like one of those Christmas flowers, you know, those red flowers at Christmas. But it actually gave me a really good idea for a Christmas cake that I want to make later at Christmas, so yay! And it looks great unmolded, as you can see, the nice clear line of the mousse, but I had leftover matcha frosting, so I foolishly piped it around the bottom, and then I think it looks kind of awkward like this because the top layer is unfrosted, the bottom layer is frosted, but everybody loved it. It was very well received. And thanks for watching this video. I hope to put up another cake video within a week.